we have a special episode that where we have a homeschool mom who also has a preschool and homeschools other children, her own children, and other people in the neighborhood. So she's going to tell us a little bit about how she got started, and this will help give you tips if you are helping your kid at home or if you are thinking about doing homeschooling. All right. Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Blennaw. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Welcome, everyone. So, we have Lauren Mosley on our show again that's going to help us interview her good friend, Tiffany Curry. Welcome.
Hi.
Okay, so Tiffany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I am a married mom of 3 boys. Their ages are 11, 9, and 2. And I homeschooled my 2 older children from the time, they were 2 years old until they recently went into private school. This is their first year in private school, so my older one is in middle school now, and my middle son is in 3rd grade. So they had been homeschooled up until this point. And after having my youngest, started an in-home childcare where I teach preschoolers. And I also homeschool a school-age child who's going to be starting kinder in the fall. So that keeps me very busy. And I also, if I do get free time, I like to do creative things like art-related, painting and drawing and crafts. But,
Okay.
I don't have much time for that lately.
So, Tiff, tell everyone how you use creativity to help your kids learn, how you keep them engaged.
I think I use a lot of hands-on things that they can manipulate and play with when teaching instead of worksheets and books and paper and pencil. I like to use things that are tangible to get them more engaged, whether it be just blocks and little figurines. Sometimes I can use Play-Doh, other sensory style things to engage them and, keep their attention and have them also use, other arts and crafts like paints and markers and all those things. Those can help them. I think that I use that also to help with just making it more creative. And I get a lot of ideas, from websites on how to make games and like just making it fun. I come up with ideas all the time. It's just like endless every day. I like, we can use this.
Yeah.
So that's really good. So that's really good. Like that's like the basis of our podcast is like falling in love with learning, making it fun, making it engaging. So what are some things as a kid that made you fall in love with learning?
Arts and crafts really were always interesting to me. Always caught my attention whenever we were able to draw or paint or make something with materials, gluing things together and creating something always caught my attention. I wasn't necessarily this great student, I was pretty average.
Me neither. We had that in common.
Yeah, I would say I was an average student. I didn't do poorly in school, but I wasn't like straight A's and
Hmm.
exceptional either. But I definitely was drawn to anything creative. Um,
Hmm.
so
Tiffany, you and I
I
had a conversation not too long ago about how when we were kids, we were watching Sesame Street because we both have that in
yeah,
common. Just weren't awesome students, but super interested in how things work. And I think I shared that with you guys on our last show. Like so,
yeah, yeah, that's what I was gonna get to. I think that it started, I can remember being super young,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe 3 or 4, and watching Sesame Street,
right.
and they went to the Crayola factory and they showed
Mm.
how the crayons were made. They showed the whole process of the wax being melted and the dye being added and pouring it into the molds and putting the wrappers on. And I was just blown away by that. I was so fascinated. And I think that that really sparked something in me to realize that everything is made. Like,
Yeah.
wow, oh, like this stuff didn't just appear. Like it was made like either in a factory or it was made by someone by hand, or it was an idea of someone and they created it. So I've always been really drawn to the process of creating something,
Mm.
whether it's cooking or you know teaching a child, coming up with an activity for them to do to learn, that help them in that way. So I've always just been drawn to the whole creative process of
Mhm.
just the idea of making something from
Wow.
nothing.
I remember that,
Yeah.
as well from Sesame Street. I do remember that. That was
Yeah.
fascinating. Um,
Right.
Right.
yeah, so you already told us like how this, that idea about making and creating and arts and craft, how it goes into what you do right now. Can you tell us like a little bit about your background, like what got you into teaching kids and being successful at it?
Basically, it started with my own children.
Mm-hmm.
So I started teaching my oldest son. Like I said, when he was around 2 years old, I stopped working and I was a full time mom, and I had my second son. So right around when he was 2.5, I had my second son. So at that point, I wanted to be home full time with my children, and I just started teaching them right off. Their dad started reading to them when they were firstborn. So
Okay.
that was always a part of our family was already on that path of just teaching the kids from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So once I stopped working, I just read more and more. I think, reading books was the beginning of our teaching journey for me. Like teaching my kids, it started with just reading to them every day, multiple books a day.
Mm.
And then gradually it started into, teaching the alphabet and the numbers and the phonics. And it just kind of, snowballed. And then eventually we decided to homeschool.
Okay.
So I didn't start out on this journey from being a classroom teacher or going to school for education or anything of that nature. I am married to a teacher,
Okay.
so he's always been like the coach, the, kind of like the one to kind of help me, guide me along,
Mm-hmm.
and give input and accountability to make sure that we're, you know, doing things in a way that is helping them grow and get better and stay on, the right trajectory so that,
Mhm.
it's not, so that I'm not like missing things, or, he just kind
Okay.
of guides me. And then I look things up and I use resources and try to find fun ways and creative ways to teach it.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about like that accountability and the coaching? Like,
Mhm.
that maybe something that you needed more guidance in, or you got some advice?
I think one of the big things that helped me was him making sure that I was giving assessments,
Okay.
that knew that what I was teaching them, they actually took it in and they were able to, that they really got it, So one of the
Okay.
ways that I tried to make that fun, assessing them, was I would like ask the older one or the younger one to teach us. So you get up and you teach whatever the topic is, like we're learning about multiplication. Let's say we're doing
Okay.
multiplication. And it's like, um, can you teach us how to do multiplication? Like, I see you have 3 times 3. Like, what does that mean? Because we had manipulatives to show what
Yes.
3 times 3 means instead of just memorizing,
Mm-hmm.
what 3 times 3 is 9. But show me how that looks. How do you make 3 times 3 using these cubes or
Okay.
blocks or whatever you have? So giving them the opportunity to show that they really get it by being able to explain it.
Wonderful. Um,
Nice.
so this really makes me think because I have definitely talked to some parents who do some online schooling or homeschooling, but it's really a lot of it's online. And they kind of realize later, like their kids don't get as much that they thought they did um, from
Mhm.
that online learning. So, like,
Yeah.
what kind of advice or information? Like, you gave us one thing, like make sure you can assess them. And I noticed your
Mhm.
assessment doesn't bring in the computer. It really is about them talking, showing, explaining.
Yes. Mhm.
So any other advice about that?
Yeah, I think that that's a big one. And maybe let's say sometimes the dynamic of parent and child can be a little bit tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, your child acts different with you than they would like their teacher. So I hear it all the time. Like, I'll change the child's diaper, and the parent will be like, she was okay or he was okay with you changing, they didn't scream or run, and I'm like, no, it was fine. They're like, oh, perfect angel, huh? Like, at home, they're like, it's drama. So there's definitely that dynamic of parents and children having, different. So I would suggest maybe, um, asking them about what they're learning in a more casual way,
Mm,
while you're doing something else, while
okay.
you're outside, playing basketball, or while you're making dinner and they're hanging out with you, or while you're eating dinner, even just
Mm-hmm.
casually bringing it up so that it doesn't feel like a test or like they're being
Okay.
drilled, just casually, oh, I saw photosynthesis. You were doing something with the plants and what was that? What was that about? And
Okay.
just kind of getting them talking and going, oh, okay, so plant cells, what is that? Like just kind of getting
Okay.
them to do it without being like, so what does photosynthesis mean? Wrong. It means this, like you don't want to be
I'm taking
drilling
notes.
things, like, just kind of casual
I
Hmm.
see.
about
Yeah.
it. I think that's a good way to do it. Or maybe even have someone else, like maybe if there's one parent that is, because we have to do this too with our dynamic. I was at home full time. My husband's away working in the classroom full time.
Right.
So, his time with the kids was a shorter window. So
Right.
he would have to look through, okay, he would look through what they've been learning and then bring it up casually, randomly say, oh, do you do you know what a vowel is? What's a vowel? And then, we would kind of get gauge, like we've been going over vowels. Do they get what a vowel is?
Okay.
So it may need to be the other parent that
I
isn't the
see.
main teacher. Maybe that could also help as well.
This brings, when you
Mm,
bring this up, like you're not saying another parent, but I have seen in some of the homeschool forums that sometimes there's like a nosy relative that's very like, do your kids really know how to read or do they really know how to do
mhm.
math? And so they might be, quizzing the kid or something and the parent feels defensive or something. Do you have that
Yeah,
experience
you're
or
gonna feel defensive. Yes, you
Mm,
will. You will when you've been, spending hours teaching your kid
right?
about the
It's
parts
like
of
in the
speech,
classroom. Sure.
and then dad comes home and says, "So what's a preposition?" And they're like, "I don't know. Are you kidding me? Like,
Right?
we went over this
Wait,
Yes.
I
for
taught you.
Teachers feel the same. We feel
we've
the
been
same
going
way.
over this
Same thing in the
for
classroom. Exactly.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think that just comes to learning. I think a lot about just parenting in general is learning not to take things personal.
Okay.
Like,
Hmm.
not take things personal when your kid is giving you an attitude. You
Mhm.
know, it, it's something about, it's not you, it's them. So don't take it
Hmm.
personal. Let's figure out what's going on here. Same thing when your kid isn't able to rattle off whatever
Yes.
answer that's correct, and you know that you spent all this time, drilling it and practicing, and
Yes.
you thought they had it. Okay, well, maybe they don't, and you got to change your approach.
Yes.
Maybe you need to take it on in a different way that clicks for them. Because
Right.
that's what it's all about, is making sure that they have the knowledge that they need, that they are able to, you know, retain it and recite it, and they got it. So,
Hmm.
sometimes
I
they
love
don't have
that.
it, you
I
know?
Yeah.
love that because I
Mhm.
do look and I say I for me as a classroom teacher, like
Mhm.
I'm like, well, that's not bad if the grandma wants to know if the grandchild can read, like, and
Yeah.
if they're not able to do it, then like maybe you do need support, right? Because we all know like we have a range
Yes.
of students that come to us, or,
Mhm.
maybe they don't get it the first time. And then even I've seen kids the next year, it's like, wow, well, you didn't seem like you were getting it when you were with me, but now you're like, sometimes it's
Hmm.
over time they get things or,
Yes.
um,
Mhm.
and I think that's something that people just need to change their perspective because it
Yeah.
people are concerned, right? Obviously, like you said, that accountability piece, like is the child
Yeah.
actually learning, right? Because they may
Yeah.
not be learning in the school. And then we're
Mhm.
like, looking at the teacher, or if they may not be learning in the homeschool, like what needs to change, what adjustment needs to be
Yeah.
made.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I like that.
Constantly being able to make adjustments is huge. You have to constantly be able to, you know, change the environment, change the curriculum that you're using may not work for your child, your method,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
me, I was always looking into different teaching philosophies and trying them out, and incorporating
Mhm.
pieces of, there's all kinds of philosophies on how to teach a child, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can bring those into your homeschool. There's a
Yeah.
good
Did
book
you
that
notice?
talks about that. It's called Wild and Free.
Wild and free.
Mm,
Okay.
Yeah, and
okay.
it kind of breaks down a variety of teaching philosophies,
Mhm.
and you can kind of go through in there, and because I've heard different names over the years, and um, didn't quite know exactly what they all were about, but that book was helpful in kind of showing you what they all are and how they kind of look if you incorporate them.
Okay.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay.
a good tip.
I wanted to ask, did you notice anything about how your younger one related to learning because he had his older brother there learning alongside of him? Was there any thing that you saw that
Oh,
would maybe
the middle son.
the middle one, right? Not the
Yeah,
baby, the middle
yeah.
one. He was learning alongside his brother, so I'm wondering, being in that environment, do you see
Hmm.
any any way that he learns that was helpful because he had his older brother alongside him?
Um, I don't know necessarily because I don't know how I'm just comparing them to each other, and they were very
Mhm.
similar to one another in learning, right? But I do think that even to this day, what helps the older one is
Mm-hmm.
actually to have the younger one, because
Mm,
sometimes we will ask the older one to help the younger one.
Mm.
So I think that that helps him because,
mhm.
especially with math, the older one is really good at math. And sometimes um, my middle son will have questions about his math and he may not get it. So we'll
Mhm.
always tell him to, like, if I'm busy, you can ask your brother. He
Oh no.
he'll be able to, explain it to you. And then, always follow up like, hey, do you get it now? Did he,
Mm-hmm.
does it make sense? Did he help you? And usually it's yes. So
Yeah.
I
So
think
sometimes
that's
that,
good.
that peer tutoring is can
Hmm.
be really powerful in that kind of
Yeah, and I
environment.
think the middle one also was able to kind of be exposed to topics in science and social studies
Yeah.
that he would ordinarily probably not have been. But at the
Hmm.
same
Yeah.
time, I don't know if they really slunk in because they were a little bit, you know, over him. But I kind of kept them on the same topics when it came to science and history. They were just both kind of, just explaining it in a more simplistic way for the middle son, but it was kind of the same topics.
Yeah, I want to
So,
highlight that. Oh, sorry.
no,
I
go
want to
ahead.
highlight that because I think, when there's parents who are homeschooling multiple kids, sometimes
Hmm.
like managing that might be something that's a challenge.
Right.
And you're saying one thing that you did is make sure, okay, they're going to be studying magnets just at the maybe the third grade level and then at the first grade
Hmm.
level, or they're going to be
Right.
studying, the Revolutionary War, maybe first grade
Hmm.
level, third grade level. So that's one
Right.
way to keep it a little bit more manageable so you're not doing
Hmm.
the Revolutionary War, the Civil War for this group, and so just keeping it more
Right, because that can
manageable.
get overwhelming. Sure, yeah. Especially if you're someone like me, because I didn't use like a boxed curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
a preset program. I kind of, like I said, it was very eclectic. Like I pulled from here and there and, got guidance from my husband and kind of mixed it all together.
Yeah.
I made a lot of things, myself. So it would have been really hard to kind of do a bunch of different topics for each
Yeah.
child. So, yeah, for sure.
Can you tell us like what is your day? Is there like a set structure for the day for when you do the homeschooling for your kids, or how do you manage? How do you do that?
Okay, well, my kids are currently now in private school,
Okay.
but um, I do, it's only been a year, so I remember the schedule very well. And it's kind of similar to what I do now with my child's care, where they kind of start the day and they have breakfast
Mm-hmm.
and um, while they're eating, whether some of them eat before they come and some of them eat here.
Right.
So while they're eating, sometimes I will read, we'll have story time simultaneously
Okay.
because I find that they're a little bit more still. They're not as wiggly and,
Mm-hmm.
distracted because they have their little snack or their food and they're just sitting there. So, and that's become something that they, anticipate that that's what we're going to do. So
Okay.
we eat and then we read story and then they have free time to play. They love magnetiles. So they're always building with the magnetiles for 30 minutes to an hour, and then we have some sort of activity. Depending on, right now my theme is like deep sea. So we have, books about the deep sea, and
Okay.
we have, you know, sensory activities and, that involve that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go outside. They run around and play outside for a while. And we come back in and they wash up and have a snack. And then I read, again while they're having snack time. And we do, actually, before we go outside, we do circle time. So we go over a calendar, the days of the week, the months of the year, and we talk about the weather and we talk about the seasons, and then we go outside. And then they come back in and wash up and have a snack. And I read, while they're having their snack.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hang out and play again. And then it's lunchtime. And then at lunchtime, I also read while they're eating their lunch. And, after lunch, they hang out and play for a few minutes, maybe like 20 minutes, and then it's nap time. And because these are little kids, so they're
Right,
the
right.
ages 2 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
5 is the oldest. So they nap, and then when they wake up from their nap, they have a snack again, and they just play. And sometimes I have an activity. We do a lot of loose parts play as well, where it encourages creativity for them to play with various objects that they can use and create something that they've imagined,
Okay.
like pieces of wood or blocks and little pasta and
Mm-hmm.
anything that can be manipulated or configured in a way that promotes like creativity and imagination, that they could like make a smiley face or make a person,
So you
just
call it loose parts play?
loose parts.
So
Loose
you
parts. So
it's not something that you buy, it's something that you bring together. Like
you
you'll bring
just
some pasta,
gather
you'll bring some
materials.
wood. Okay.
Yeah, you just gather various materials, that maybe little animal figurines and little wooden blocks and, you know, you may have like a bunch of wheels or a bunch of little
Mm-hmm.
hats or just anything that you may have, as a teacher, you pom poms and anything that they could play with and
Okay.
engage with. You just kind of put it all together and see what they come up with.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, just a free for all. Everybody just digs in and makes whatever they want to make.
The Rewrite Method and the Rewrite Method Workbook are your go-to resource for helping kids to learn to fall in love with writing. It has the tips, tools, resources, strategies, and skill building activities to help kids fall out of writing hate and into loving to write. Get your book set today.
So what about earlier you said something about magnetiles? Did I say it correctly? Magnetiles?
Magnetiles.
Can you tell me more about what that is?
So they're colorful squares
Mm-hmm.
that are kind of like blocks, but they're thin,
Mm-hmm.
and they have magnets around the edges. So when you put two together, they stay. So
Mm-hmm.
you could build a structure of
Okay.
some sort with them. I have some parts that you can connect it to that have wheels, so they can build little cars,
Okay.
and there's little ramps that they can draw them down, but it's their imagination again. They're just building their little structure or their little vehicle, and they put things inside after they make their structure. They put little people in, and different things like that. So yeah,
Okay.
those things are like that's I would say the number one hot
Okay.
item in the
Okay.
in the playroom for sure.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Creativity, that's key, right? That's
Yes.
great.
When your kids were homeschooling, what kind of schedule did you have for them?
Yeah, well, my kids were homeschooling, so they would get up and the same thing. I would make I would get up and make breakfast. They would still be sleeping. I would get up first. That's another um, cheat code there. Like parents, whoever it is that's homeschooling these kids, if you're not getting up first before those children and getting your time to whatever you need to do, work out, drink your coffee, pray, read your Bible, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you need for yourself, you got to do that first.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I don't know how you're gonna make it. I don't know how. I've seen parents that are like, I sleep, and those kids just fend for themselves until I'm up in a couple hours after them. I don't know that life. Like
Okay.
I would not be okay if I had done that
You need some
because
alone time at the beginning, some
Mm-hmm.
oh,
grounding and
Yeah.
I I did for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I had to do that. I had to get up early, get myself, you know,
mm-hmm.
together, and then figure out, what they were going to do throughout the day. But so yeah, I would be up first, have my time, make their breakfast, and they would eat, and I would read to them as well. I would have like my kids, I would have a big stack of books because they were used to me reading all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
we would read like 5, 6 books at a time. Or what I also did when when my middle son got a little bit older and he could handle it, is I would do a thicker book and we would read it, throughout the week or month. It would take us to get through it,
Yeah.
like Alice in Wonderland or
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
one of those Roald Dahl books like James and the Giant Peach or
Mm-hmm.
something that is, more substantial, not just a picture book, but it's like a story that goes on. So they really enjoyed that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a good way to kind of start the day off, reading to
Mm-hmm.
them a story that was engaging. And then we would uh, probably, start with one of the subjects, probably started with math because that seemed to be the, for me, easiest to teach, considering
Okay.
I'm not very good at math, but I find that math is the most fun and easy to teach
Okay.
because you can make a game like that. Like whatever math concept you're teaching, you can just look around your room and like, oh look, we're gonna make this math. Get these little cubes in here, get these little figurines, these little animals, and we're
Mm-hmm.
making a math game right now. Let's do it. And that was always fun and easy. So we would just go through our subjects, our math, and then we would do our reading and writing and the social studies a couple of times a week. We didn't do social studies and science every day, but we do it a couple of times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have their time outside while I was making lunch. So they're outside running around. I'm making lunch. They come back in. They're eating. And, I'm going to read again with them while they're eating. And we're going to probably talk about what we're learning and what they grasp from it. And, we always went on an excursion, a field trip, or something of the sort, um, pretty much on a weekly basis, every other day. We would,
Okay.
even if it was just to go to the park and have them run around at the park. And we would take our book and read at the park, and then they would have playtime at the park.
Nice.
Or we would go to museums or, hang out with other homeschoolers. And they also had like piano lessons that they had to go to, and they did karate. And so, it was always a full day just depending on what they had going on. But that's pretty much how it was. We would just, kind of go like that most days.
It sounds
Mhm.
like so much, there's so much there, right? You make it sound
Yeah.
like it's just like so simple, but like some major takeaways I hear is like
No,
an
it's a lot.
excursion. You said at least every other day, like even if it's going to the
Mhm.
park or if it's going to a museum, like planning something, getting out
Yeah,
of the
meeting up with
house,
other friends.
meeting up
Yeah.
with others. And I also hear like those extracurricular activities. So it's not all you doing everything.
Mhm.
Like you have this, just like in school, they have like a PE or they may have a music teacher. You're talking about music lessons. So that's another
Mhm.
way to help
Mhm.
balance the load of what they're learning because those are, PE, physical education, or different things like that, art, for performing arts, all of that is part of a holistic education, like a well-rounded education.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
Hmm.
think that's really helpful for listeners who are thinking about doing homeschooling or maybe are already doing homeschooling and need some tips on how to, improve or expand what they're doing already, build on.
Mhm. Yeah. I think one of my
Hmm.
takeaways is I really want to encourage my parents to read while they're eating. Those are
Yeah.
two really great activities to do together. Your kid is sitting down
Yeah.
at dinner, having a snack, and just making that a consistent time, especially during the summer. If you have
Yeah.
time you're at home, making those intentional moments
Yeah.
where they can sit
Mhm.
and read and having lots of books.
Yes.
I think
Lots of
that's
books. Yeah, we have a ton of books. Yeah,
yeah.
always had a ton of books.
Mhm.
And my kids to this day, they love to read, and they always take a book with them
Mhm.
wherever they go. So even the little one is like, I got to get my book.
Yeah.
He doesn't
It's just
read.
like it's just natural. Yeah, he doesn't
Like,
even read.
we're gonna go bye bye. I got to get my book.
Aw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a natural part of what they do, and they
Yeah.
just are constantly learning, right? Reading during
Yeah.
eating,
Mhm.
and going different places, and they're learning where they go, even if it's
Mhm.
social interaction or
Yeah.
otherwise. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, and I did forget that. Like after I always with my kids, and I still do it with my childcare kids. But after they eat and we read our book, we would always, do like I call it circle time, where we like sing songs and we sing the days of the week, the months of the year,
Hmm.
phonics, whatever certain things that they need to memorize.
Yeah.
We would go over those things
Mhm.
first thing after they're done eating um, in the day.
Nice.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how you said you make learning just kind of it's everywhere. You just if you're gonna do a math lesson, you can pull things from right there in your environment. You don't necessarily need to go out and buy things or buy an expensive program or you know
Hmm.
you take some beans out of a jar. You can do a
Yeah.
lot of things with just the materials you have in your environment. So I think that's really
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
comforting thing if for parents to know it doesn't take a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also incorporating things that your children are interested in. I
Hmm.
remember one time we were learning about money. And at that time, my kids had all of these little stuffed animals and, figurines that they were really into. So we like made um, like a store with those animals, and they were shopping and they were buying things, and we,
Nice.
exchanged money with, little, I don't know, this little teddy bear is buying um, I don't know, this popsicle. So we got to charge him $1. And then he's making, so how much money do you have now? And just,
Yeah.
doing things like that, spark their interest in knowing, incorporating what they're interested in is really
Yeah.
key.
Oh, that sounds great.
It really does. Yeah, it sounds like it's really a fun time and learning is just like naturally a part of life and fun. Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
great. What I didn't hear is a lot about like computers, and I feel like when I'm in the homeschool forums, I hear a lot of parents talk about how the kids are on the, and I brought it up earlier, but do you use any like computer type based learning or?
Hmm. Yeah, as my kids got older, they were learning to type. So they
Mhm.
had typing games that they would do, and they would do sometimes math games on the computer, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and then they would also start to type their little paragraphs and essays and the things that they would write. They would start
Right.
to type those out on the computer as well. So they would do both. They would write by hand as well, and sometimes, they would also type it out. And now that they're even older, they are really active on the computer because they're learning a lot about AI.
Mhm.
So they do a lot of video making and creating different things with AI.
Yeah.
So of course that involves a computer. So they did, they didn't do a lot when they were like really little. There wasn't a
Mhm.
whole lot of computer or just screen time in general when they were really young. We were just weren't big on that until they got, I would say, maybe 5, 6 is when it became more of a regular thing. But prior to that, it was just once in a while or, on the weekends or here and there, but not, I wouldn't say it was like a daily thing.
Okay. And like another thing I see is like sometimes people aren't managing what the kids are doing, or they're not, maybe they got busy and they didn't look to see where they are. So how do you manage that? Like, do you make sure you are looking every 5 minutes, or like how do you manage like what they're doing online?
Um, yeah, it is. You know, like now that they're older, um, so we have all shared devices. So they're
Okay.
not just on their own computer, on their own iPad in
Mm,
their room,
I see.
away from everyone. Their computer is like my computer. Their iPad is my iPad. So
Oh, I
there's
see.
no like their own
Oh, wow.
things. We just don't feel that that's necessary.
That's great.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
So
that would transform some of the things, like nip some of that in the bud, right? Like, because it is just
mhm,
their computer, I think, a lot of times, and it's
yeah.
easy to veer on the wrong track, right?
Yeah, and I understand why because like my husband, for example, he uses his computer a lot for work. So it's not always convenient for the kids to hop on his computer and do their
Right.
stuff. They do still use his computer, at times, but it's not always convenient.
Yeah.
And me, I'm not someone that is always using my computer for work. I
Right.
use
Right.
it, a few times a week for work,
I
not
see.
every single day. Right.
Mm,
So, that's easier. So if I had a job where I needed to use my computer every single day, several hours a day, then that would be a little bit more challenging.
good
So if
point.
you're one of those parents, I would say make sure that your child is using the device in an open area where everyone is around and they're not just up in their room just doing whatever they want.
I
Um,
see.
Yeah.
and then you just have to make sure that you keep communication open and you're going through and looking and knowing what they're engaging with online,
Yeah.
right?
important.
And
Yeah.
there's all kinds of, I'm sure, parental blockers and things that you can
Mm-hmm.
do. But I like to just go through the search history. And it's funny because when I sat down to do this interview, I saw something, a picture on my computer, and I was like, what's that? So I'm going to ask, I'm going to be questioning about this thing that I see on my computer here. It wasn't there yesterday, so I'm kind of like, what's this? We got to talk about this. So you just have to, you know,
And I'm
yeah.
sure
So,
they're going to be more mindful about what they're searching if they know that
Yeah.
mom's going to be on the computer and, we share
Yep.
it. So just that alone keeps
Yes.
them on the up and up.
yeah. And as parents, you know your child, you know if they're like suspicious, they have the suspicious face.
Yes.
If you see that suspicious face, then engage and go, oh, what's going on? Like, what are we doing?
Yes.
What's on your computer? What, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, my middle schooler will have a test coming up and the teacher provides a study guide.
Yes.
So he'll take that study guide and upload it into AI and make like the coolest podcast for him to listen to
Yes.
that
Oh, wow.
incorporates everything about he recently showed me where it's like the podcast is not only about the topic on this study guide, but the voice sounds like so cool. It's like, hey man, you learning about this or whatever. Like, no cap, we gonna do it. Like, it's so cool sounding like just some
Wow.
guy talking to
The
him, just in
homeboy.
regular, like, yeah,
Oh,
homie talking
wow.
about whatever this topic is. It's like the coolest thing. So I'm just saying that to say that,
I'm going to have to check out that AI app. That sounds amazing.
yeah, it's really cool. Like, wow, this is, yeah, he's talking to you like, you know, your homie down the street. It's like so
Right.
fun.
We'll
Yeah,
definitely
he's
put
talking
the
about the
information.
Revolutionary War, you know, like it's,
Yes.
Right. Right.
yeah.
We'll put it in
Sounds
the
so
show
fun.
notes for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Tiffany, where can people find you?
So on my Instagram, I share a lot of activities that I do with my kiddos here at Quest for Learning Academy. So if you go onto Instagram, it's Quest for Learning Academy, and you'll see a lot of things there.
Okay, and it's in our show notes as well. Well, you have given us so many great, valuable tips and information and insight as a homeschool mom. And we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes.
Thank
Are
you for
there,
having me.
yes, yes, yes. Is there any final things that tips you would give to a parent that may be struggling with their homeschooling journey or um, just supporting their kid at home? Like, even though they might be learning at school, but they need some extra support at home. What are final
Mhm.
tips that you might give them?
Well, I think I would um, definitely want to articulate that parents are their child's teacher.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
That it's not, you can teach your child and you are their teacher. They
Mm-hmm.
go to school and they have a teacher at school, but they also have a teacher at home.
Yeah.
So whether you know it or not, you're teaching your child every day
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
by what you say, by what you do, by what you don't say, and by what you don't do. So as a parent, you have to utilize the resources if you are feeling like there's something missing, that your child isn't learning, that you want them to learn,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that maybe they're not getting at school.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many resources. I think you maybe in the future might be able to talk to my husband,
Yeah.
who's extremely resourceful when it comes to AI.
Mm.
What I do when I first started, and even still now, whatever topic it is that I want my child to learn or know, younger children, go on Pinterest and type it in.
Okay.
Even if it's a book that you're reading that your child is maybe reading that you want to maybe be able to ask them questions about and you've never read the book, you will find all kinds of things. There is no reason that you should feel like it's too difficult or too, challenging for you to teach your kid. All you have to do is just have the dedication to want to do it and utilize so many resources.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, everyone. Make sure that you do something today that gives your child the competitive advantage.
Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week.